Hello, welcome back to this channel. Jacob Payton here. Today I'm going to be talking about Nick Cutter's The Troop. I'm going to be 100% honest. I've heard a lot about this book and I was not 100% prepared for it. I'm not squeamish usually at all, but I did see a lot of warnings that said if you're squeamish, watch out. And I kind of shrugged, I laughed, I said, you know, I love horror. Hell, I used to work in a funeral home. I'm not really squeamish. I was wrong. There are definitely some parts in this book that you shouldn't read if you're eating. Just a heads up. But that being said, I did really enjoy this, so let's dive into it. Once every year, Scoutmaster Tim Riggs leads a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness for a weekend camping trip, a tradition as comforting and reliable as a good ghost story around a roaring bonfire. The boys are a tight-knit crew. There's Kent, one of the most popular kids in school. Ephraim and Max, also well-liked and easygoing. Then there's Newt the nerd and Shelley the odd duck. For the most part, they all get along and are happy to be there, which makes Scoutmaster Tim's job a little easier. But for some reason, he can't shake the feeling that something strange is in the air this year. Something waiting in the darkness. Something wicked. ... It comes to them in the night, an unexpected intruder, stumbling upon their campsite like a wild animal. He is shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and voraciously hungry. A man in unspeakable torment, who exposes Tim and the boys to something far more frightening than any ghost story. Within his body is a bioengineered nightmare, a horror that spreads faster than fear. One by one, the boys will do things no person could ever imagine. And so it begins, an agonizing weekend in the wilderness, a harrowing struggle for survival. No possible escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. So yeah, basically this guy comes up in the middle of the night. He is stranded, and he has like this bioengineered tapeworm inside of him. One that also like breeds quickly. I don't think it's actually a tapeworm. I think they describe it as something else. But anyway, it breeds very rapidly. So think like The Thing, basically, right? If it gets inside of you or it touches you in some way, shape, or form, it'll burrow inside of you and then replicate itself immediately. And it is hungry like a tapeworm. So it needs to be filled with more and more food as it's burning its toast out. Something they don't discover until it is too late. This is set in like a really small, I think, Canadian town. So while there were a lot of things that didn't really make sense to me, mostly the way they behaved, because let's be honest, if some very sick person washes up on a deserted island while I'm there camping, I am going back to the mainland. Instead, Tim, who is the scoutmaster, decides that he's going to treat this person because he is also the town doctor. And while I kind of understand him being like, I need to treat this person now, it really doesn't make sense, the fact that he jeopardizes all four of these children as well. Even though they're technically like early teenagers, it still seems super irresponsible. And at times throughout the book, he even kind of mentions that. That does not stop him from doing it and leads to all the bad things that happen. This book becomes Lord of the Flies very quickly, as one of the group has some pretty nefarious means. Think, the neighborhood kid that likes to torture small animals. And so a lot of darkness comes out pretty early in the book. That being said, one of the things that didn't make sense to me is there's one of the characters in this book. I don't want to give away who. I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm going to get into some spoilers real quick. So if you are reading this book or about to read this book, you might want to tune this part out. There is a character in this book that becomes pretty convinced by the not nice character that he has the worms inside of them and basically ends up killing himself in a way or injuring himself to a point of no return due to the fact that he is trying to constantly carve these worms out of him. I found that part a little unbelievable just because of the fact that even if someone was that paranoid, I feel like they would have passed out at some point. But man, I mean, this kid really goes to work on himself with a knife. And I'll be honest, that part was pretty hard to read when he was like basically discovering parts of his body as he is cutting into them. So once again, if you are squeamish, you might want to avoid this book. But once again, that said, this book was really good, and I am glad I read it. It gave me a lot more things to be afraid of than I realized, because while there isn't bioengineered worms out there, there are actual parasites, and the parasites that the bioengineered worms are based on do in fact exist. So it made me fear tapeworms in a way that I had never even thought of them before. And then the only other part, once again, giving out some spoilers here. So if you are reading this book or currently reading this book and want to avoid spoilers, you might want to pause this and come back to this part later. I did not like the fact of basically how the military and police responded. Even though they knew it was highly transmittable, at no point did they tell any of the boys what was going on. And even though, you know, some of the equipment and stuff had been destroyed by the one who was up to no good, it just seems very far-fetched that they would have left these children to fend for themselves, especially when they kind of had a better hold of what they were dealing with than in a lot of horror stories where like some sort of plague or something happens and they have no idea what's going on. You know, we get flashbacks in this book and we get interviews with other people, so it is very clear that you know, they knew who was responsible for not only making this, but had a, you know, I think a bit of a handle on the situation, or at least more of a starting point than a lot of, you know, agencies get in books. So I did find it kind of weird that they just kind of like left these kids to fend for themselves for days at a time until basically the kids escape or try to escape, and that's when they actually intervene. And even by that time, it's, you know, a lot of bad shit has already happened. So once again, spoilers. I will not tell you who made it off the island. I will not tell you who the bad guy is. I will not tell you who dies first. That is all things you're going to have to read for yourself. If you are squeamish about parasites inside your body, worms breeding in terrible places, people eating raw things, animals included, or each other in some cases, acts of cannibalism, acts of self-mutilation, then this book might not be for you. That being said, I did really enjoy this book. It was not what I expected based on some of the reviews. I will say that I definitely did not put much stock into the, you know, if you're squeamish warnings, and I kind of wish I had, because I would not have read this book so quickly after dinner when I first started it. That is for sure. I would have loved to see this be made into a movie. It also isn't a very long book. I think it comes out at around, 341 pages. So it's not like a massive Stephen King horror book. So it is very, you know, quickly readable. And, you know, parts of it did kind of feel pulpy at times. And I'm going to say that like in the best possible way as someone that loves pulp fiction. We get a lot of action, right? We get a lot of backstory, but we also get a lot of action. So once the story gets going, it is going very fast. And I really appreciated that because it was a very small cast of characters. So, you know, if it had drug itself out, I could have seen myself, you know, DNFing a book like that, or, you know, do not finish basically, or did not finish. But that was not the case. I mean, we get right into the action from the very beginning, and I really appreciated that. I prefer books that do that. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that. And yeah, this book, pacing-wise, super does not disappoint. It does give some backstory at times about each of the boys, and we do get some like flashback scenes. But I think, you know, that's necessary. I don't care what story is, that's necessary in any story, because without those I wouldn't have really cared about any of these kids. Like one of them, Kent, comes off as an asshole from the very beginning. He's kind of like the local jock. His dad's, you know, the kind of the bigger cop. I don't know if they call him a sheriff, the police chief or something like that. But anyway, he basically thinks he's untouchable. He calls adults by his first names, and he's kind of a dick. but the backstories we get from him make him seem like less of a terrible person, or at least we get a little more understanding to why he behaves. So that was necessary to feel compassion for that character. Obviously, just like the character that goes bad, right? We get some backstory into that, and we see that's not just he flipped a switch on an island due to a bad situation. He was always headed down that road, and I appreciated that a lot. So yeah, I like this book. I like the pacing. I like backstories, which I don't like flashback scenes. I appreciate them in this book. The head hopping all felt appropriate, right? There are 4 to 5 people on a very small island. It makes sense in a traumatic situation to get all of their points of view. As someone that doesn't usually like head hopping, and I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but I think I've just been reading a lot of books that do head hopping well. That played out really well. Yeah, if you've been on the fence about reading this book, or you just want to dive into a Nick Cutter book in general, I would say go ahead and try this one out. I liked it a lot. I'm going to try to read The Deep by him. I think I have it on my Kindle already. That's the next Nick Cutter book I'm going to read. I've heard a lot of good things about this author. This is the first Nick Cutter book I've picked up. You know, if you're not squeamish, or even if you are and you don't mind a little gore, I would highly recommend this book. You know, you can do what I did and go to your local library and check it out. I like this. I hope they make a movie of it. If you didn't like it, or you loved it, or you have another Nick Cutter or a Nick Cutter-esque recommendation of a book you think I should read, let me know in the comments below. And as always, I will see you guys next time.